There's gonna be some spoilers, you've been warned. Stranger Things is a show now on Netflix. It stars Winona Ryder, David Harbour, Matthew Modine amongst a cast of very young actors and actresses, and is a, well, show I didn't really want to see, but then I ended up seeing it anyway. Good start. The show is about a young boy who suddenly vanishes into thin air. Nobody knows where he's gone. They don't know exactly where he is, and there are manhunts, and the mother, played by Winona Ryder, is getting extremely worried, and nobody knows exactly what is going on here. And the boy's friends are also trying to carry out their own investigation and try to figure out where the kid has gone. And in the middle of all this, they run into a young girl who calls herself 11, and she may have some answers. I had no idea about this show. I didn't see any trailer. I wasn't excited for it at all. I didn't even know this show existed until social media began going nuts about it. Suddenly everyone wanted to watch this show. Everybody wanted everybody else to watch this show. Hey, have you seen Stranger Things? No. Well, you should definitely go check it out. What are you doing with your life? So finally, I decided to check it out because I'd heard some things about it, some very good things about it, and that it was an amazing, great new show. Yep, Stranger Things is a really, really good show. And because I didn't know anything about it, I think that's where the surprise element for me was, I think, better. I loved every moment of this show. Yes, there are some gray areas, but then what doesn't have some gray areas? And I'm going to talk about those in a little bit. And as a whole, Stranger Things was still a ton of fun to watch. I had a wonderful time with this show. And I have a lot of that to attribute to the performances of the show. Every actor is really grounded in reality because they're trying to establish the fact that this is the 1980s. And this show, more than anything else, is kind of like a love letter to the 1980s, from the way that people dress, to the way that people talk, to the kind of music that plays. Is a perfect encapsulation of how 1980s America was like. And this town, this little town called Hawkins, where this entire show is taking place, embodies all these things about 1980s United States extremely well. And like I said, the performances are grounded. Let's talk about the performance of Winona Ryder. Now, I have seen her before as an actress in a few other films. In this show, she plays a woman named Joyce Byers who's lost her son, Will. And the way she portrays it, you really feel for this character sometimes. Nobody wants to believe her. She feels like there is some other entity, something else is involved, some supernatural element. And nobody seems to believe that. Everyone thinks she's talking nonsense. In fact, in one point in time, her ex-husband comes back to make sure she's okay and says that, I think you're nuts, I think you should have a drink. And her older son, Jonathan, is absolutely upset about it. He's like, what are you doing? You know, you're back ruining things again, huh? This is one of those gray areas, but we're going to get into that in a little bit. But the performance by Winona Ryder is extremely well done. It was one of the better performances of the entire show. Another great performance was of her son, Jonathan. A very meh character at first, but as the show goes on, he gets progressively better and better, and within 8 episodes, he becomes really compelling. By the end of it, I really like the character. One of the best performances of the show by far was Chief Hopper, played by David Harbour. My god, I love this guy. Yeah, he's a little bit of a hard ass. He's a little cold at times. He has a very quick reaction to things. It's like, oh, I don't have time for your emotional moments. We gotta go right now. But we just met each other. I don't care. We have to go right now. There's a lot of that in the show, but I still love this character. I enjoyed watching his character. Another character who grew on me as the show went on was the character of Nancy Wheeler. Nancy Wheeler is basically this girl who is at school, and she is the sister to one of Will's friends, a kid named Michael. It starts off as extremely cliched. Again, it starts off as that whole, oh, I am a smart girl who likes this guy who's this jock, but he has like a nice heart, and I want to date. Breakfast Club. And that starts off exactly as you'd expect it to, and that time you're like, it's a little cliched, I'm not feeling this. However, as the show goes on, it actually gets a little better because her character evolves. She leaves the guy, then she's with Jonathan trying to find out what happened, and at the same time it also happens that her best friend, a girl named Barbara, has also disappeared in the same way as Will has, and then suddenly they both are working together to try and figure out what exactly is doing all these things, and they're connecting these to a very shady organization. There are 4 kids in this movie. One is Michael, Lucas, Dustin, and Eleven. And these four kids pretty much steal the entire show. These kids are phenomenal in the show. Every time they were on scene, it was very investing. It was very caring. You cared about every single one of these characters. You connected with every single one of them. Their stories, their dialogue, the way they had this big friendship. You cared about that friendship. You didn't want to see it fall apart. And the way Kid Eleven comes into it, this odd girl, and everyone's really suspicious of her except Michael, who just has some sort of a connection towards her, which he can understand. And he tries to make sense of it later on in the season. It's kind of cute, actually. But the way they start trusting her as the season goes on is extremely, extremely well done. And I loved that aspect of the show. I liked how these characters just kind of got together in the end. Because Eleven, you have to understand, Eleven is on the run from the government agency, which may know something about what's happening to these disappearing kids because of her abilities. But the way they show Eleven's powers, the way they show all the things she can do, she can help find Will, she can help find Barbara, she can help find out exactly what's going on. And that entire aspect, you could use it in ways where it's like, oh, she's basically being used, but she has more to it than that. The bond she develops between these characters is very, very well done. And here's where I attribute the writers and the directors of the show as well. The sequences are written extremely well. The dialogue is very crisp, very intense dialogue. And the direction, of course, is very, very good. These two directors, the Duffer Brothers, they do an amazing job of directing the show and these 8 episodes. I was never bored once throughout this entire season. Now, I did mention I have some gray areas with this show. And part of that has to do with 2 subplots they introduced. One is between Nancy and her mother. And this subplot kind of bothered me. I get why you needed it because you wanted to develop those characters. There is a lot of Nancy's mother in the show, and that kind of deviates at times from the actual plot because she doesn't know what is going on, and the fact that she doesn't know what is going on just kind of takes it away. She's like, okay, what's going on? And then every time it happens, you're just like, gotta go, we gotta find the kid. That was a minor one. It didn't affect me as much as one other one did. And that's where I bring in subject number 2, subplot, Nancy and her boyfriend. So Nancy has a boyfriend named Steve, who is this jock who's really popular, and he has this bunch of friends who are complete dicks. I mean, seriously, there is not one redeeming quality about these guys. They're just high school assholes. And that kind of really, really takes away from the show at times, because there'll be certain things which will be going on, and then immediately after that they will cut to this, and you're like, that bothered me for a while. However, they do get rid of the subplot as the show is going on, but it does stay for a while, and even in the end scene, and it's kind of bothersome, honestly. And it kind of affects the pacing of the show many, many times. There was something with the pacing of the show. The first few episodes, the first half, is very intense. It's very interesting. In the second half, however, coming down to the last couple of episodes, the pace suddenly starts to show a little bit of a drop. It starts to eventually pick up after episode 7 happens, but until that point, it is a little clunky in some moments of the show. You don't feel as invested in it as you did with episodes 1 to 4, and that's kind of a letdown at times, but the fact that it makes up for it later on as the show goes on, it kind of makes it feel a little better. And finally, another problem I had with it was the whole ex-husband subplot. Like, did we really need that? They take up 2 halves of 2 episodes trying to draw this thing out that, oh, Joyce was married to this complete douche and there were 2 kids, but then he thinks that she's just being a terrible mother and that he's still a complete wreck of a person even after all these years. That really bogged it down for me. I wasn't interested at all. I didn't give a damn about this guy. I didn't care if someone just shot him in the head at that time. And of course, he does get thrown out of the house. Guys, in the end, Stranger Things is a really good show. I enjoyed a lot of the show. I loved the acting. I loved the directing. I loved the writing. I loved the atmosphere of it. I loved all these things about the show. It was a perfect love letter to the 1980s. I have a few gripes with some of the subplots that they bring in, some of the writing in that, and some of the execution of that feels a little wonky at times. And the pacing takes an ever so slight hit in the last 4 episodes. But regardless, I still really love the show, and I really suggest you guys check it out. And because I already gave out of numbers on my movies reviews, why don't we give this one on grades? I'm gonna give Stranger Things an A-. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Please subscribe if you like what you just saw, and I will see you guys later with more reviews. Should I stay?